All right, hi girls again. I'm just going to do a quick little tutorial here. I'm going to show you what I use and I'm going to give a couple tips and tricks of how to apply your color street. So I always use a buffer, as I said in my last video when I did some polish remover, that I always use a buffer. It's got 4 sides. There's a file side, a buff side, a polish, and a shine. I usually stick to like the buff and the file, but there's always awesome uses for the other 2 sides as well. I always have a cuticle stick. The cuticle stick is important. If you ever choose a strip that's too big, you can always perforate around the edges. I'll kind of show you how to do that. And then I also use it, you can use the flat end to push back cuticles, and then I usually use it to pull up my cuticles. And it helps, I think, keep my manicure lasting and looking nicer longer. So I usually like run it around the base of my fingers, you can see like this. And it peels up any extra layers, and then I go ahead. And if I have to file, if you've got any ridges and things like that in your nail, you can use a little bit of the filing side of the buffer, and then you can also use it on the end to keep everything smooth. So I usually, more importantly than anything, I use the buff end. I always buff kind of the tips, because if there's any splitting at the ends, it's gonna increase your risk of chipping. So I usually buff my ends, kind of make sure they're nice and smooth, something kind of quick like that. I don't spend a whole lot of time doing it. Buff the ends there. And then I'm gonna pull out Capitol Hill. So I'm gonna peel that. And then this way you can see too what's inside if you haven't already used Color Street. You can peel it open, and it'll come with an alcohol prep pad, a nice cute little file, and your 2 sheets of nails that make up 16 nails. And then you'll peel it. Because I've done this a few times, I know typically what sizes fit my fingers, but if this is not, if this is something that's new to you, it's not something that you're used to doing, it's really important that you match up and find a size that fits really well. I always recommend that you go with something a little bit smaller, because then you can stretch it and fit it as you need, as needed. Thumbs, actually I almost made a mistake. Thumbs should always be done last, because for me, especially the method that I use for my sets, you want to use your thumbs to help perforate the rest of your nails. So I'll start with my pinky, and you peel the clear layer off. You'll grab the silver part. Oh, I almost didn't prep. That's what happens when I'm doing a video. Don't pay attention to what I'm doing. So prep all the nails first. You want to make sure that you clean them well, so that way the nail polish adheres to them. And then you want to do everything as quickly as possible, because the nail polish does start to dry out. And that's why we also don't guarantee that the second set, if you seal your package, that the second set will last as long, because if it's drying out, the adhesive component may not stick as well. So then let me see, I'm gonna try and do it kind of sitting up. I set it down on my nail. You can't really see that, I'm sorry. I set it on my nail. I always kind of adhere it to the center, and then I push all the way to the edge. Push to the edge here, push to the edge there. Voila, look how nice and awesome that looks. And then I use my thumbnail to perforate around the edges, and I just push down, push, 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 and peel off. You can see, can't really see that, but look how good it looks. And then I use the other half on the same finger on the other side. They are strategically sized to fit all different nail sizes, but you will see that like sometimes they're not always even. So like on this nail, it's a little bit big. So when you go around the edges, you're always going to want to make sure you press down, and if you have to like kind of pinch the edges there, you can. So you can see that on my pinky on this side is a little bit smaller than my other pinky. And so there's a little bit of the edge. There's a little bit left over on the edge. You don't want that to sit on the skin. So I'm gonna use my orange stick, or my cuticle stick, and I'm going to flatten it as much as possible And then I'm gonna stick it on the edge and just perforate around the edge, and there will be a tiny little line of polish that I kind of peel off. And then this is why I do my thumbs last, because I can peel my thumbs. You can see here there was like a little bit extra. I made sure it was off my skin. I'm gonna get rid of that. Press down the rest, make sure that everything is adhered nicely, that it's adhering nicely. And then I'm gonna perforate around the edge like I did my last nail. And when you're doing this, this is a little bit of a technique here. You always want to kind of like pull it out to prevent any sort of lifting or bunching. If you just like flatten it over the edge like this, you'll have like edges. So I'm always very strategic about the way that I kind of pull on the strip a little bit and then perforate. Pull and flatten it and then perforate. Pull and flatten and then perforate. And peel it off like that, and we're good to go. The other thing that I actually wanted to kind of address here, I'm going to do it with this small little strip because I know that this one actually, if I want to make a pedicure out of this, I may want to keep that for my little toe. So why don't I grab another strip over here? I'm going to grab, let's see what fits my fingers best. I'm going to grab this one here. I want to show you really quickly how to gently pull a strip. If you think that it may not fit your finger very well, or you're trying to make good use of the strips yourself, you can stretch the strip. So if you're like, oh, this is just a teeny bit too small, I recommend that you pull them slightly before you actually place them, and you want it to be in about the shape that you need for your finger before you make it adhere. Now, if you place it and you're like, oh, that's totally off center, you can always pull the strip up and redo it. No big deal. But if you're like, oh, I really need to kind of stretch it, I don't recommend that you stretch it when it's on your nail because sometimes tearing does occur. So if you're like, oh, it needs to be just a teeny bit bigger, then go ahead and stretch it in your fingers like this. Or if you have a flat nail bed and it's a little bit too round and you need to flatten it on the bottom, you can do that like this. Stretch it just a teeny bit, get it in the shape you want, and then place it. Another thing to think about is that you always want to place the strip if it's not necessarily the correct fit, or you're trying to make the most of your strips. You always want to, I keep placing it over there. You always want to try and place it so that one edge fits completely before placing the rest down, because it's easier to perforate and get rid of excess on one side than it is on both. So make sure one side is a really great fit, and then you can stretch or pull or do whatever you have to do on the other side, and then you only have one side that you're fiddling with. All right, I hope those tips were helpful, and if you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me.